In 1981, San Francisco, Chris Gardner marketed a portable bone density scanner and left his son, Christopher, at an inexpensive daycare in Chinatown. He chats with a janitor about tidying up bad language and spots a typo in the daycare slogan. While waiting for a bus, a homeless man confuses his scanner for a time travel device. Chris goes to hospitals to sell the device and requests his wife, Linda, to collect their son even though she has a long shift. He has to sell too, but hasn't completed a sale recently, resulting in his car being towed for unpaid fines. That night, Chris sees a Rubik's Cube at dinner. Linda inquires about their overdue taxes, and when Chris brings up the need for an extension, she becomes annoyed and heads off to work. He has difficulty solving the cube. The following day, he encounters a stockbroker who clarifies that achievement relies on mathematics and interpersonal abilities. Later, Chris thinks about why he isn't as joyful as others. The next morning, Chris informs Linda he wants to pursue a stockbroker position, but she believes it's a poor choice, resulting in a disagreement about their rent. He visits a brokerage firm, but leaves his scanner with a street artist, cautioning her not to take it. Inside, he discovers the application process, but hurries out when he notices the performer fleeing with his device. Even after a lengthy pursuit, she flees on a train. That evening, Chris comes back home troubled about misplacing the scanner. The following morning, he watches a news segment about a professor who has solved the Rubik's Cube. As Linda heads off to work, she requests that he come back without the device, and he assures her he will sell it. On the trip to daycare, Chris talks about the spelling mistake in the motto with his son and discovers the daycare plays TV instead of providing lessons. He addresses a nanny regarding overdue payments. Later, he hands in his application at Dean Witter Reynolds, but his talk with Jay Twistle is short because of Jay's packed schedule. After exiting the office, Chris sees the street performer with his taken medical device. Angry, he runs after them, but she hops on a bus to get away. Thinking about how he used his life savings on the gadgets, which hospitals consider unnecessary, he feels as though he's lost a month's supply of groceries. After a focus chase, he gets the device back. At a bus stop, his son, Christopher, prompts him to sell the devices. Later, Linda discovers both gadgets at home and feels let down. After giving Christopher a basketball for his birthday, Chris attempts to clarify the previous incident, but Linda is disinterested and no longer has faith in him. He then spots Jay calling for a taxi and reminds him about his application. Jay dismisses him, but Chris fabricates a story about carpooling, and Jay hesitantly consents. In the taxi, Chris talks about his abilities while Jay concentrates on completing a Rubik's Cube. To catch Jay's notice, Chris proposes to fix it. Doubtful, Jay passes it along, and the taxi driver pays attention as Chris describes the riddle. Jay makes a joke about cruising around just to see him figure it out. Before they arrive at their destination, Chris skillfully finishes the puzzle, but Jay abandons him to cover the fare. With just $5, Chris requests to be let off a few blocks away. At a red light, he attempts to flee, but remembers he left his medical device behind and hurries back for it. The driver pursues him, menacing him. Chris hops onto the subway, but drops the device when the doors shut on his hand, leaving it behind. A man without a home, believing the gadget is a time machine, grabs it. That evening, Chris contacts Linda to say sorry for not collecting Christopher from daycare. Angry, Linda informs him that she and their child are departing. When Chris gets home, he discovers they are missing. He later gets a call from Jay, who requests him to jot down his secretary's number for a meeting in 2 days. With all of Linda's things gone, Chris can't locate a pen and has to remember the number. He hurries to a shop to jot it down, but gets sidetracked by a friend talking about a football match. The following day, Chris encounters Linda as she delivers Christopher. She expresses her discontent, and Chris consents to her departure, but insists she cannot take their child. Afterward, he collects Christopher from daycare before Linda shows up. That evening, the landlord requests the rent, and Chris assures he will pay later. The landlord recommends relocating to a motel to cut costs and insists he vacate by morning for painting tasks. Chris begs to remain longer, proposing to paint the apartment by himself. The landlord consents to grant him an additional week if he finishes the painting. The following day, while painting, Chris hears a knock and discovers 2 police officers who take him to the station. There, he settles his parking fine, but finds out it will be confirmed at 9:30 a.m. With no choices, Chris contacts Linda to look after Christopher while he's away. She consents, but mentions she'll come back late, so Chris stays overnight at the station. The next day, Chris hurries to his interview at Dean Witter Reynolds, wearing the same outfit as the previous day. Feeling shy, he pauses when the secretary says his name, but finally goes in. The panel is let down by his presence, and Chris straightforwardly states he was taken into custody for overdue tickets. Even so, his communication abilities stand out, and he brings them joy, lightening the mood. Later, Jay praises him, but Chris is concerned about the 6-month unpaid internship. Jay motivates him to continue chasing it. On his journey home, Chris thinks about the job's dangers. No pay for half a year, and just one intern will be brought on board. His sole asset is his 6 scanners, which he can still trade. After the interview, he goes back home to complete painting before Linda and Christopher show up. Later, Linda informs Chris she intends to relocate to New York to work as a server. Chris concurs, but emphasizes that Christopher remains with him. With tears in her eyes, Linda departs, trusting that Chris can look after their son. Chris then contacts Jay's assistant to verify his interest in the position. The following day, Chris and Christopher relocate to a nearby motel, assisted by a friend who owes him $14. As it's Saturday, Chris brings Christopher to play basketball before selling a bone density scanner. Christopher expresses his aspiration of becoming a professional, but Chris recommends he targets something more achievable. Yet, he motivates his son to follow his aspirations. They visit a hospital where Chris sells the scanner, bringing in some essential money. When cashing the check, he allows Christopher to purchase a chocolate bar. The following day, Chris starts his internship and discovers the craft. The coordinator emphasizes the significance of drawing in clients. At lunch, Chris notices Mr. Fromm, but their conversation is cut short when Chris sees his missing scanner. He pursues a homeless man holding it, but gets struck by a car. The driver looks at him, and Chris notices he's missing a shoe. He hobbles back, moving through the city for the remainder of the day with a single shoe. Chris feels unappreciated as his internship supervisor frequently directs him. Every day, he hurries to catch the 4 p.m. bus to get his son from daycare, then rides the crosstown bus home by 10 p.m. while trying to afford rent at the motel. At the firm, interns reach out to possible clients to connect with CEOs. Even though they're anticipated to remain until 7 p.m., Chris can only work 6 hours each day because of childcare. To make the most of his time, he skips hanging up between calls and avoids drinking water to reduce bathroom breaks. Even with his attempts, he finds it hard to finish a complete call sheet after 2 months. Annoyed, he chooses to bypass protocol and directly contact the company's CEO. To his astonishment, he arranges a meeting with Walter Ribbon. As he hurries out, his internship supervisor requests him to relocate his car, but Chris clarifies he has a meeting. The manager insists, wasting Chris time as he struggles with a stuck door and looks for parking. Not able to locate a parking space, he takes his boss' car to Ribbon's office but gets caught in traffic and misses the meeting. On his return, he discovers a parking ticket beneath the windshield wiper. That evening at a diner, Chris writes a check to settle his ticket and asks his son, Christopher, to accompany him for a business meeting that weekend. At first unsure, Christopher consents when Chris brings up an opportunity to attend a football match. The following morning, as they make their way to Walter Ribbon's home, Christopher inquires about the game. Chris taps on Mr. Ribbon's door, expresses gratitude for the chance from the day before, and fabricates their intentions, stating they were seeing a friend close by. Mr. Ribbon asks them to come with him to the box seats for the game. To keep up appearances, Chris conceals the truth that he doesn't have a car. In the game, Mr. Ribbon shares that he likes Chris but will not take his offer. Still, Chris and Christopher have fun with the game while Chris connects with Mr. Ribbon and his colleagues. After 4 months, Chris has sold all his devices, just getting by during his internship. However, his circumstances deteriorate when the IRS takes his bank account for unpaid taxes, leaving him penniless. In a tough spot, he requests a friend for the cash he's due, but the friend thinks the obligation was cleared when he took them to the motel. Annoyed, Chris debates until the friend shuts the door. Later, while observing Christopher play at a playground, Chris sees his missing medical device with a homeless man and successfully gets it back. The guy begins yelling about needing the time machine to visit Jimi Hendrix. Chris and Christopher hurry to sell the device, only to discover it's damaged, although the hospital assures payment once it's fixed, leaving Chris heartbroken. That evening, they come back to the motel to discover their things outside, and the lock altered. Fatigued, Christopher pleads to be allowed inside. Frantic, Chris taps on his friend Wayne's door, but Wayne doesn't respond. With no choices, Chris and his son have to relocate once more. They arrive at a train station where Christopher notes that the device isn't actually a time machine. To lift his spirits, Chris pretends it is and behaves as if they've gone back to the era of dinosaurs, proposing they take cover in a cave. They go to the bathroom to play, staying there all night. As Christopher rests, Chris softly weeps, feeling swamped. He shields Christopher's ears when someone knocks on the door. The following day, Chris takes his bag to work. Jane sees and inquires about his destination, leading Chris to create a tale about a journey to Sacramento for golf with possible clients. Chris and Christopher seek refuge at a homeless center, but are denied entry since it is exclusively for women and children. A team member guides them to a different shelter a few blocks away, and they rush to reach the 5 p.m. deadline. After standing in line, they nearly get turned away because the shelter is almost at capacity, but they manage to get a room when security spots someone in front of them attempting to cheat. In the shelter, Chris wraps his son in blankets and attempts to repair the broken scanner, finding that it has faulty components. He reads beneath streetlights, as the power is out at night. Their everyday habit of queuing at the shelter becomes usual, so Chris brings his suitcase to work and tells stories about it. He learns to finish conversations with clients swiftly to line up early for the shelter. One day, they go to a service at the shelter, and afterward, Chris prepares for his internship test. The following day, he completed the exam swiftly to get in line. As he leaves, Mr. From, getting out of a taxi, requests $5 from Chris, having left his wallet behind. Even with his restricted money, Chris assists him. That evening, Chris and Christopher get to the shelter late and need to look for another place to stay. To make some cash, Chris gives blood and purchases A to repair his device. The following day at the shelter, Christopher inquires if Linda departed due to him. Chris comforts him that it's not true. After putting Christopher to bed, Chris successfully fixes the scanner. He sells it the next day, making enough cash for 4 additional weeks. Thrilled, he informs Christopher they'll spend the night at a hotel, relishing the coziness of a TV. The following morning, they flee the city by heading to the beach. Eventually, Chris obtains agreements with a few of Mr. Ribbon's pals from the football match. Later, on his final day of the internship, Jay praises Chris in the bathroom for landing numerous clients, making it seem like a goodbye speech. Chris is then summoned by his internship coordinator to meet Mr. From. Seeing Chris' new shirt, Mr. From remarks on it. Chris shares that it's his final day as an intern, and Mr. From looks forward to seeing him wear it again the next day for his first day as a full-time worker. Feeling overwhelmed, Chris gets emotional and expresses gratitude to the panel as Mr. From hands back the $5 he lent. Later, Chris steps outside, thinking that this section of his life is joy. He grabs his son from daycare and hugs him closely. Chris subsequently founded his investment company, Gardner Rich, in 1987. The scene concludes with Chris and his son strolling together, laughing and relishing each other's presence as the actual Chris Gardner passes by.